Chapter 5. I stood in the sand behind Carmen, watching the spent wave lapping around her bare feet as it made its way back to the sea. We've done everything we can do. She stared out at the surf crashing into the pilings under Santa Monica Pier. I'm not going back to Mexico, Johnny. I nodded, but she wasn't looking at me. She brushed loose hair away from her face, an endless task in the afternoon breeze. I'm serious, Johnny. I'm not going. Yes, I understand. But what would you do if the ruling went against you? She turned and walked toward me, grabbing my hand and coming close to my face. You think it might happen? What? You know what's going to happen, don't you? No, I don't know. She leaned in closer. The remnants of the Virginia Slim she had flicked into the ocean a few minutes earlier mixed with her perfume. You're worried, though, aren't you, Johnny? It all depends on how the judge views the circumstances of your initial entry into the country. If he... She nodded. We've been over that. I don't want to be put into custody. That's not going to happen. If the ruling isn't favorable, we'll just post a bail and start the appeal process. I'm not going to take any chances. What does that mean? It means I'm going to take things into my own hands. She put her arms around my neck. And I want your help, Johnny. I am helping. I'm doing all I can. She kissed me slowly and deeply. I pulled away slightly, trying to collect my senses. You know I'm doing all I can, Carmen. She pulled me back toward her and kissed me again. She stopped suddenly and looked at me. Yes, I know. Legally you're doing everything you can. But I have another way. Another way? She held my hand and started walking down the beach, pulling me after her. We sat at the open bar in silence, and I watched the surrounding palms ruffle in the ocean breeze, trying to digest what Carmen had just told me. The bartender set our order down. Here you go. He patted the bar and walked away. I took a sip of scotch and let the liquid flow through me for a few seconds, and finally I said, This is crazy, Carmen. I'm crazy for listening to you. Carmen picked her margarita up with her right hand, but kept her left hand on my thigh. She took a sip and set down the glass. Do you love me, Johnny? I stared at my drink. She laughed. You don't have to answer that, Johnny. I looked at her. I care about you, Carmen. It's just that, well, this is more than... She finished for me. More than you're willing to pay for me? Well, that's a little harsh, but I have a lot at stake here. What? A dull little life helping wetbacks stay in the country. It's been good to me. She moved her hand from my thigh. I'm sorry, Johnny. I didn't mean to make fun of you. You don't need to get involved. My leg ached for her touch. You'd go through with this by yourself? I told you, I'm not going back to Mexico. But there is a good chance that you'll be able to stay here legally. It's not good enough. And besides, this is my chance for me to get away from Carl. She rarely talked about her relationship with Carl. Is it that bad? She looked at her drink and nodded. I put my hand on her arm. You never said. It's been awful. He thinks he owns me. Well, how long has... She looked at me. How long has it been like this? I nodded. Since I was 14. But your mother, didn't she object? Not to Carl. He was our meal ticket. But... I searched for words to console her. Carmen laughed briefly. Women, especially illegal immigrants, don't often have the luxury of high ideals. We have to do what we have to do. She took a sip of her drink. She told me to be brave and do my duty. I was oddly relieved to hear that. I understand. You don't have to talk about it anymore. She turned and looked at me, her eyes suddenly welling with tears. Johnny. She leaned over and kissed me gently. Johnny, I never knew what love was until I met you. That was it. I whispered in her ear, I'm not letting you go. She pulled away and looked at me, blinking away tears. Oh, Johnny, are you sure? Yes. She kissed me again. We'll be so happy. I know it. I glanced at the bartender, who seemed to be getting uncomfortable with this public display of affection. Let's find someplace a little more private, and you can explain things to me again. She smiled. Let's go, Johnny.